Now, if you're new here to the channel, I'm Kevin with Lifestyle Overland, and usually we're traveling about the country with my wife and my daughter Caroline in our 4Runner or GX you see behind me. But today we're digging into some gear, and right here in front of me are two bags that might just change your entire camping game. So let's dig into them, but first, roll that intro. All right, so everybody knows there's nothing more nostalgic than a crackling, real wood campfire. But it comes with a lot of downsides as well. Now, back in 2014, we were exploring New Mexico and really getting hot and heavy and all this overlanding stuff. The next trip that we took out, there was a fire ban that was issued, and so that changed everything when it came to what we were going to be able to do at camp, because as you know, everything centers around a campfire. So we started doing some research and landed on one of these propane campfire units. And let me tell you, ever since we went to the propane campfire, we've just simply not looked back. Other than just a few camping trips where we had a chainsaw and wood was plentiful and the weather was right and there were no fire bans, but for the most part, we gravitate towards this for multiple reasons. And I'm just gonna run right through the list real quick just to get you thinking. But wait, before I dive too deep into this, no matter what kind of campfire you have, the first thing that you should be buying is a fire extinguisher. Is there a fire extinguisher in your car right now? Is it in your camp kit? Do you know where it is when you're at camp? Can you get to it, or is it packed under 4 layers of boxes and bins? Get a fire extinguisher first. All right, so let's crack this one open and show you what we're working with here. Now, as you can tell, this one has seen its fair share of use. So this is the Outland Firebowl. I think it's model 893. It's a 19-inch fire pit, perfect size for a family of 4 or 5. You might want to go with something a little bit bigger if you've got a lot more people. Now, the beauty about a propane fire pit is the fact that it is instant on. It's instant heat. There's no rounding up kindling in the mornings and trying to find the dry pieces of wood and all those steps. No, you simply turn this on, instant heat. Now, I will say, the downside is that that heat goes straight up. There's not a lot of mass. There's no coals that necessarily hold a lot of heat. So that is a little bit of a downside, but it's not a deal breaker by any stretch of the imagination. Because the upside to that is when you turn it off, the cool down period is remarkably quick. We can pack this thing back into its bag in the course of about 15 or 20 minutes. So when you decide to leave camp, you simply turn it off, pack everything down, and it's ready to go. Now, for those of you who are all about wood campfires, there's no shame in that at all. But you know you have to put that fire completely out. It has to be dead out. And what that means is you should be able to shove your hand into those coals and not feel any warmth. Because if you've ever been one of those people who come upon an abandoned campsite, say on a Sunday afternoon, and you see those smoldering coals, that's a good reminder that it doesn't take much to reignite one of those campfires, especially once the wind kicks up. And so to make it go dead out, you usually have to use what? A lot of water. So that's more water that you have to waste. That's more water that you have to bring. With this thing right here, you just turn it off and it's done. Now, the biggest selling point in our family was for Sarah, my wife. She does not like smelling like smoke. Yes, it's nostalgic. Yes, that's camping. Yes, we all love it. There's something primal about sitting around a wood campfire. But when you do it day in and day out, week after week after week, everything starts to smell like smoke. And that's just not the most pleasant experience. And so Sarah, once she was able to experience what a propane fire pit was like, it's hard to get her to light something else up. So this has been a huge, huge plus for the wife. So one of the biggest selling points for my family has been the fact that there's not any smoke to deal with. Now, another benefit to using a propane fire as opposed to a wood fire is you don't have to transport the wood. And if you've ever been out west, actually it's pretty much everywhere now, you see the beetle kill. There are so many conifers that have been decimated because of this beetle that's being propagated. And half the reason why that happens is people take firewood from one location and they travel to another location. Well, you know, all those bits and pieces and bark fall off. And a lot of times those bugs are being spread by using real wood fire that wasn't sourced from the proper location or heat treated. Yeah, if you've never heard of that, they actually do heat treating for some of this wood nowadays, just to kill those bugs. Seems like an unnecessary step just to be able to use wood fires, but that's just our opinion now. And then a propane fire pit also means that you don't have to bring an axe, a saw, a chainsaw, bar oil, fuel for the chainsaw, and all the work that goes into cutting all that stuff up. Not to mention the fact that you're hoping that the wood in that local area is going to be dry enough to use, because if it's not, guess what? It's hard to light and you get even more smoke. So, sounding pretty good so far, right? Now, to be fair, this isn't necessarily small. And if you bring this, you also have to bring this. That's bulky, it's a lot of stuff. But if you think about it, the last time that you stacked up a weekend's worth of firewood, it wasn't too far off, was it? And then the added benefit of having a propane fire pit is you can predict pretty closely to how much burn time you're gonna get. Whereas if you go and buy firewood at a gas station or a local general store that sells such a thing, you might have wood that burns up quickly, or you might have wood that smolders. You're just not gonna know. So having some predictability on what you're taking out for 3 or 4 days is gonna last, that's huge too. Now, another side note for those of you with small kids, you know that once they get playing around the campfire, I've seen more than my fair share of kids trip and almost fall into it. Some of them that have fallen into a campfire, and those coals have no mercy. So something like this, yeah, it's a flame. Will it burn them? Probably. Probably going to singe some hair, but there's no hot coals in here for their hands to land into. So you're going to be able to pull that kid off of there a little bit faster and not deal with all the blistering and stuff to the degree that you would in a wood campfire. And I know it's probably not a big deal for most of you, but it's just something to be mindful of. Now, there are a few cons and some things to be aware of. If you run this on high, you're going to be looking at about a 7 or 8 hour runtime. It will suck the fuel. The trick is to run this thing on low. Now, again, I mentioned that there's not a lot of heat retention in this fire pit, but we're looking at trade-offs, right? And for us, we've been using it, like I said, since 2014. We haven't missed it all that much. You can wear better gear. You can use hand warmers. There's ways to supplement yourself so that you're not freezing. You don't necessarily have to have a raging bonfire every time, but it's something to be aware of. That way you're not disappointed the first time you use it because you're not getting that radiant heat coming off of it. Now, just as a side note, we do have some ideas that we're going to be experimenting with to help this a little bit. So if we have any breakthroughs, we'll be sure to let you guys know here and on the social media outlets. Another little hiccup to be mindful of is propane in really cold weather can be a little bit finicky, especially if you're dealing with a full tank. And if you've ever experienced this, you know exactly the frustration I'm talking about. Now, you can help this by maybe storing it in a warm place overnight. That way when you get up in the morning, it's not going to be froze up on you. But it's something to be aware of. And definitely do not try to use these tanks on their side. They need to be stood up so that that gap has a space for it to off gas and then pass through the regulator and down to the fire pit. If you get one that gets hung up, chances are there's some liquid propane in that regulator. Now, there's a lot of different size propane tanks that you can go with. The custom ones are definitely really expensive, but the downside to going that route is the fact that you're going to have to find someone who can actually fill it. So if you run out of propane on a Sunday morning and try to run into a little town in the middle of nowhere, chances are you're not going to be able to get service that you need. So going with a 20-pound propane tank means that you can swap it out at most gas stations. But I will say that if you have the opportunity to get it filled, it's definitely a less expensive way to do it, and you generally get more fuel going with a hand-filled option. Just make sure that with whatever propane tank you decide to go with, that you strap it down securely. All right, so now let's move on to the hacks. We've been using these fire pits for a really long time, and I was just looking for different ways that we can use it for more than one purpose. That's the ideal situation with any piece of gear that you put in your vehicle. If it can have more than one role, then its value just went way up to your kit. And so we've been playing with a few things. And in this bag right here, we just stepped up our propane fire pit game. Now, if you've been watching our recent videos, a lot of you have already asked in the comments, what is this Grate and where did you get it? Well, this is an Amazon special. This is a 19-inch, fairly heavy-duty Grate because, well, for one, I've seen the cheap ones just bend and bow once they get too hot. So went with this as our base. And then we also have this gargantuan lodge. I think this is a 17-inch skittle.
Skittle?
This is a 17-inch skillet that we've been using. And let me tell you, you can cook a lot of food down in here. Now, going with this setup obviously meant that we had to kind of revisit how we're going to attach things over here and just dive into a couple more hacks that we've got going on. So for starters, this little grate was slipping and sliding around on that lip because it's the exact same size, 19-inch fire pit, 19-inch grate. And so while I could simply weld some tabs onto this so that it perfectly sits onto the rim, I wanted to find a solution that anyone out there could just bolt on. So what we've done is we've actually got neodymium, I think that's how you pronounce it, rare earth magnets that we've attached around the rim so that this thing doesn't slide around anymore. Now, the unintended benefit that I wasn't even expecting was the fact that this lid now sticks on magnetically, which is really good because the straps that they send with this thing, after about a couple seasons, start to dry rot, especially if you're going to carry this on a roof rack or something and have it subjected to the elements. So this one snapped on me probably about 2 or 3 months ago. So now I don't have to worry about that. This thing is stuck right on top. And side note, wood fires are not dead. We'll still do a wood fire from time to time. So by carrying this and the included feet, once we do make a wood fire, we can set this over the coals and cook there as well. So again, lots of options to have. Now, just to address a concern that someone brought up on Instagram, magnets lose their strength when they are heated up. I think the typical magnet loses its strength right around 151 degrees, if I remember correctly. But the rare earth magnets are a little bit more resilient, and so they're not going to be affected as much. Plus, the rim of this fire pit does not get crazy hot to start with. I've actually moved it a couple of times while it was on, so I'm not too concerned about the heat degrading these magnets. But if you have access to a welder, you would definitely be better served to put a couple tabs on this grate, that way it doesn't move around. I just wanted to have an option out there that anyone could replicate. And then our big old lodge lays right here. Now, one little note that I want to throw in here is sometimes when you're cooking on this, low is still a little bit too hot, especially if you're trying to do something low and slow, you're trying to simmer something. So you can cheat by taking this and instead of going to low, take it past high and then gently take it towards the off position, and that will give you even lower settings, which is also another good way to save on fuel if you don't want to run out too fast. And now, obviously, you don't need to have a huge skillet like this. You've probably already got some cookware at home. I just wouldn't recommend using anything that has handles that can melt, but this thing has been amazing. We've made some really good meals on it. And the beauty of this is, if it's super cold out, you're actually sitting by the fire while you're cooking, so you're staying warm. It's a whole new experience. It's like, I guess sort of like a fondue pot. What are we gonna call this? The camp dew pot? But anyhow, this has been a game changer for us because now we don't have to worry about carrying a whole camp stove. We carry our fire pit that's gonna keep us warm and give that camp vibe, and then we can actually cook on it. But wait, there's more. You've seen in several of the recent videos of me using my lighter and pulling my hand back. Yeah, I lose a few hairs every now and then. It doesn't really bother me. But I thought, you know, everything these days has an electronic igniter. And so I found a little kit on Amazon and added it to this little thing. So now I don't even have a lighter with me. I can just simply reach over, hit the electronic ignition button, and let it rip. Simple things. And by the way, there's going to be links to all this stuff down below. I'll probably make a dedicated page on lifestyleoverland.com. That way you can go in there and see pictures of it and get links to all the stuff to replicate this kit. There are a few companies out there who are starting to make fire pits that do all of these bits and pieces. One of them is called Trailfire, and I've actually got one. I've had it for several months now, and I'm fixing to put it into the mix just to start testing it to see what some of the off-the-shelf options look like for someone who maybe doesn't want to, you know, do some mods and things like that. But we already had this fire pit, and so we just wanted to expand on it and see what we can make it do. Like I said, we've had this particular model since 2014. This is the second unit we've used, and it's been rock solid. The other one is still working, like I mentioned before. So yeah, we want to see what we can do to make this thing right here cook all of our meals as well. Now, I do want to add just real quickly, you've probably seen videos of people cooking right over the rocks. That's fine as long as you're not in bear country, because I can tell you right now, this isn't like a real campfire. The coals are not going to burn up the fats and the liquids and the juices and stuff that drip down in here. So you're going to end up with bear bait if you're not careful. And to be honest with you, if these rocks are absorbing a bunch of liquids and they are very, very porous, it's possible you could end up with a really stinky mess on a hot summer afternoon once this stuff starts to decompose. Something to think about. And by the way, if you've ever seen a Coleman camp oven, it's genius. It's such a great little option. I've tested it on this Grate over this fire pit, and it's done really, really well. So continuing to test new things, try new things, but so far, this thing right here has been a game changer for us. So I guess really the only question left is, do you go with something that's already pre-built off the shelf, like the Trail Fire, or do you take one of these and build it out? Now, obviously, if you already have this particular fire pit or something similar to it, then probably want to build it out. But apples to apples, the Trail Fire is $450 retail as of today, and then all the parts and pieces to build this thing right here is around $365. So you're going to save a little bit and have a lot of flexibility as well. All right, well, I hope this video has helped you make up your mind whether or not propane fire pits are for you. Like I said, we've seen a lot of benefits from it. We haven't really looked back at wood fires. They're fun. They're nostalgic. They absolutely are. But the more people that we can move towards a propane cooking apparatus and a propane campfire, the less chances that we're going to have for forest fires, the less chances that stuff's going to get burned up or shut down. And so, yeah, we're huge advocates of it, obviously. But I don't know. Give it a try. Let us know what you think. If you have any ideas on other hacks that we could add into this mix, definitely let us know down in the comments. But that's going to wrap it up for this video. If you enjoy what we do, definitely subscribe to the channel so you'll be notified of upcoming videos. And until next time, remember, stay curious and leave it better than you found it.